Hi, I'm Michael Medeo, and I'll be talking today about our paper on co-designing checklists to understand organizational challenges and opportunities around fairness in AI. And this is joint work in collaboration with Luke Stark, Jen Wortman-Vaughn, and Hannah Wallach at Microsoft Research. As you may know, AI systems can discriminate, reinforce stereotypes, and further disadvantage already disadvantaged groups. As a field, it's critical that we address this. In 2018, Microsoft took a step towards this goal by announcing 6 AI principles: fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, all underpinned by transparency and accountability, concepts that are fundamental to our society. And we're not alone in this. Many organizations have published principles intended to guide the responsible development and deployment of AI systems. The Berkman Klein Center created this comparison of the content of over 30 sets of principles. And these principles have proliferated in recent years. And as others, such as Jobin et al., have pointed out, however, these types of value statements are often high-level and abstract, raising the question of how to make them a reality. This challenge is encountered by AI practitioners, as you can see in this quote here. In 2018, my co-authors conducted a study published in CHI last year where they interviewed 35 AI practitioners and surveyed over 250 others in domains from computer vision to educational AI to web search to understand their challenges in addressing fairness in AI. And what they found was that nearly half of the participants surveyed had found fairness issues in their products or services. And of those, 99% found issues after deployment, with 55% suspecting that there were further fairness issues that their teams had not yet found. So what might be done about this? Well, there's been a lot of hype lately about tools and metrics that will solve fairness in any AI system. But AI is fundamentally socio-technical, and purely technical solutions and tools will not address the underlying issues. At every stage in an AI lifecycle, such as you see here, teams make decisions that can uphold or compromise their AI principles. In other high-stakes domains, like medicine, aviation, and structural engineering, teams increasingly rely on checklists. Despite their simplicity, checklists are remarkably effective at getting teams to do the things that matter. In medicine, checklists have cut deaths due to surgery complications by over 40% and saved hundreds of millions of dollars by preventing line infections. For the past couple years, some organizations have produced responsible AI checklists, such as this one by DJ Patil and his collaborators. And other private companies and universities and government organizations have put out similar data science and AI ethics checklists, such as the ones you see here. But few of these appear to have been designed with input from the practitioners and teams who they are intended to impact. When checklists have been introduced in other fields without involving practitioners, they've been misused or even ignored. Surgeons initially refused to use surgical safety checklists, such as the one you see here, and commercial airline pilots misused pre-flight checklists, sometimes resulting in catastrophe. So this leads us to ask in this paper, first, what are AI practitioners' current processes and workflows for identifying and mitigating issues of fairness in AI? Then, what are these practitioners' needs and desires and concerns about a checklist that might support that fairness-related work? And then finally, how do these practitioners envision such checklists might be implemented within their organizations? So to do this, we co-designed an AI fairness checklist with 48 industry practitioners from 12 technology companies. We began with a set of semi-structured interviews where we probed on teams' current processes and their issues and needs. And then we conducted a set of co-design workshops with participants, where at each stage of an AI lifecycle, we elicited ideas for checklist items to include, feedback on these items, and created implementation scenarios with participants to probe on issues, questions, concerns, and how these checklists might actually be implemented in their own design processes. So we used co-design methods such as storyboards and what's known as speed dating to quickly iterate on and probe different scenarios for checklist design and implementation. And we also asked participants to create their own storyboards representing ideal scenarios for implementation and use those to understand what they would want as well as pain points and concerns. All of this resulted in over 60 hours of audio data, which my co-authors and I, coded using inductive thematic coding methods, resulting in sets of high-level findings and themes. And you can read more about these details in the paper. So what did we find? Well, first, for our first research question, about understanding these current processes and workflows, first we found that AI practitioners are largely aware that fairness and ethics are important. However, at the moment, their process was often more ad hoc. As one participant described, maybe they'll fix something proactively, but maybe reactively. And our participants shared that often addressing fairness was up to individual advocates. And in spite of good intentions from participants, many felt that their organizations incentivized them to quickly ship products. And these incentives were often at odds with the cautious deliberation needed to evaluate the implications of AI for fairness. As you can see in some of these quotes, participants shared this tension between their organization's incentives and their own desires for fairness. And our participants felt that there were social costs to being this type of individual advocate for fairness and ethical issues during deployment and development. Even participants who wanted to raise concerns about fairness issues, many felt that they were always labeled this squeaky wheel or a troublemaker. And this advocacy led to social costs, which participants described having impacts on promotion and career, particularly for junior members of the teams. Then, for our second research question, we investigated practitioners' needs and desires and concerns for a checklist to support fairness in AI. First, we found that participants felt that checklists could empower individuals to advocate for addressing fairness issues and potentially avoid these social costs or the need to justify why fairness is important, and could act as this sort of organizational infrastructure. They shared how having a checklist could enshrine this need to think about and work to mitigate fairness issues as a formal part of their design and development process. And we've also found that participants felt that having this formal checklist for fairness in AI could help, but only if it fit into their existing workflows. So following prior work in design of medical checklists, we elicited these pause points in teams' processes where checklist items could be completed, such as spec reviews, code reviews, and other moments where teams are already gathering to make critical decisions prior to different stages in their process. Our participants also shared that they wanted to have additional resources and templates to adapt a more general checklist to their team's specific process. And this is in line with prior research in the design of medical checklists too, such as this World Health Organization surgical safety checklist, where the WHO released a packet of additional resources to support the implementation of this checklist, to make sure it was implemented with fidelity. And in fact, others in the field of fairness and ethics of AI are developing such resources and documentation, such as Timnit Gebru et al. Developing data sheets for documenting different aspects of data sets, and Mitchell et al. Developing model cards to support reporting on the nature of different models. And this documentation is a great start, and many of our participants shared that they were beginning to use such documentation. However, as As with other tools and other elements of to support AI fairness, these are only one piece of a larger life cycle. And in fact, our participants shared concerns that a checklist may lead to rote compliance. So they describe how fairness is a deeply complex social phenomena, and in AI, a socio-technical phenomena. And one participant shared that, fairness is a non-engineering thing, this participant says, and it may be upsetting to people who have spent their lives believing they can solve the world's problems with computing. And so we report more in depth on this in the paper, but participants shared concern for a checklist leading to rote compliance or leading to, as this participant describes, making it easy to game without actually making things more fair. And this is part of a larger notion of techno-solutionism, where you might implement some tool, here a tool, perhaps maybe a checklist that might reinforce this solutionist thinking rather than actually improving. So to try to get around this, we developed checklist items that were intended to do what's known as prompting critical conversations. And this is inspired by the prior research on checklists in structural engineering, where the checklist items are intended to drive these conversations between different teams. And here, between members of the design team or between the designers and key stakeholders. We also put into the checklist several caveats and explanations, as you can see in this preamble, as well as cautions that a checklist will not guarantee fairness and should be done iteratively in different ways and should be documented throughout this process. So as you can see, one example checklist item here, to solicit input and concerns on the system vision from stakeholder groups. And this is one example of one of these critical conversations. We then prompt our checklist users to then revise their system to address and mitigate potential harms. So finally, how might practitioners envision fairness checklists might be implemented within their organizations? Well, first, we heard that it must come from leadership to change the culture of their organization, to drive this kind of adoption and prioritize fairness. So this participant shared their experiences with internationalization and how, as they were developing code, they would break the code, and then finally managers and organizational leadership recognized that they needed some formalized process. As part of this, our participants shared that these must be integrated into organizational goals and priorities, such as key performance indicators, in order to support advocacy for their use and prioritize resources that might be allocated to support them. So this participant, this program manager, shares, even if everybody cares about addressing fairness and ethical issues, it may not move these top-line metrics. And as we heard earlier, those metrics are what's often tied to promotion and advancement for many members of these teams. So they want some way to justify that they are making progress towards these goals. We have a short paper in the CHI Fair and Responsible AI workshop where we discuss some of these findings in a bit more depth, and I encourage you to check out that follow-up paper. And then finally, participants shared that they wanted support in taking a more general checklist and customizing or adapting it to meet their team's specific needs. And many of our participants analogized to security and privacy and accessibility, other sorts of cross-cutting concerns where there might be general processes, but each team may have different workflows and different specific needs. Finally, this research resulted in a AI fairness checklist, which we share as supplementary material in the paper that you can find here. So this is a start, and we think after the iteration with our participants that we think it's a pretty good start, but it shouldn't be the final word in this. So we encourage others to adapt this, to build off of what we've done here, and take this forward. So where might this work go? So as we discuss in more depth in the paper, first we found that our participants thought it was necessary but challenging to engage diverse stakeholders throughout the AI lifecycle. So this is something that is so critical, but teams may not have existing processes or methods to support this. And in fact, Graham Dove et al. And Qian Yang et al. Have written a bit about some of the challenges of adapting current UX methods to designing AI and machine learning systems, as well as other values-based design methods from Friedman and Hendry and Flanagan-Nissenbaum and others, which have taken root in HCI, may not have existing methods to support their use in AI and machine learning design. Secondly, future research may explore how the sociocultural and organizational factors of teams, of AI design teams, may impact checklist use and efficacy. So while we intend for these items to spur this good tension and prompt these critical conversations to do what Shilton et al. Called values levers and sort of prying open these tensions and discussion, there is a very real possibility that without appropriate use, that checklist could instead promote rote compliance and that sort of gamifying or just checking the boxes. And then finally, future research may investigate how to take this more general type of fairness checklist that we have co-designed and adapt it and customize it for different teams' workflows, different domain areas, right? What might it look like for computer vision versus natural language? And then for AI products versus AI services, where the relationship between the AI service designers with their clients may look very different. So thank you for listening, and I encourage you to read the paper and find out more. Thanks so much.